by welcoming you all to the Burren and to the Burren Winterage School. My name is Brendan Dunford, and just on behalf of the Burren Bio Trust, who are coordinating this event, the Burren Programme and our sponsors in the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine here in Ireland, I'd like to welcome you all to the 8th Annual Burren Winterage School. We have a very interesting session lined up today, and the theme of today is farmers as first responders to our global climate and biodiversity crises. Just to warn you that today's event will be recorded and will be available for sharing through podcasts and through YouTube. We'll also be tweeting out using the hashtag BWS20, and we hope you enjoy the sessions. So I'm going to hand over right now to our chair for today, who's going to be James Moran. James, over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is James Moran. I work in the Department of Natural Sciences at Galway Mayo Institute of Technology here in the west of Ireland. I think we've had a very interesting and thought-provoking winter school so far this year, with loads of participants from around the globe, and welcome to all of you that are participating in this afternoon's session. Today we're going to really think about how we can actually support rural communities and farmers in these areas to rise to some of the pressing local, national and global challenges we have for sustainable development. In particularly in session 5 here now, we're going to look at how we build capacity in what we term peripheral rural areas that will be described and defined later during the session. We're going to start off to set the scene with a couple of presentations from Murtagh and Andy Bleasdale, who will talk about specific initiatives that are happening across Europe in terms of our Horizon 2020 project, and also Andy's going to introduce the initiative that's getting underway, I think, in Ireland at this stage. Andy. Then in the second half of the session, we're hoping to make you all work a bit. We're first of all going to have Serafeim and Mugurel introducing a new Erasmus education program that we have starting at the moment. And this is all about building capacities for sustainable development in peripheral rural areas. Now, I hope particularly in the second half of this session that you will all participate in the polls we're going to put up, and also participate through the chat functions to give us your views on what are the skills and gaps in education that is being delivered at the moment, and how we can improve this into the future. So first of all, I think we can get started. I'd just like to hand over to Murtagh first. Aisling is a researcher on the Ruralization Horizon 2020 project in the Rural Studies Cluster in the Department of Geography and Archaeology at the National University of Ireland in Galway. So we'll hand over to Aisling now.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, James. I'll just share my screen now with you. Okay, so today I just wanted to kind of give you an introduction to the Ruralization project, and I'm a researcher on the project working in NUIG Galway. The project is headed up by Moran. And Ruralization is it's focused on rural regeneration broadly. And today I kind of want to just draw on some examples. We're kind of just over a year into the project. And draw on some examples that very much speak to this idea of building capacity in rural areas, and this broader kind of linked idea of rural resources and why rural resources are important to building capacity. So I'll spend a couple of minutes talking about the project and why it's kind of important, particularly now, and what we're trying to achieve with it. I'll talk a lot about opportunities, and very much Ruralization is focused on identifying opportunities in rural areas. But also it's not enough, or it's not the whole story. We need to understand how we can realize and sustain these opportunities. And again, coming back to the key message, this idea of resources and capacities are at the center of of this potential regeneration process that within ruralization we're trying to understand a bit better and a bit more specifically. I'll talk through some examples. As I said, we're just into the second year. We have been collecting data, doing a lot of reviewing existing evidence, but two examples that kind of come out of our primary work, and also the Scottish example I've highlighted there is very much based on some desk-based research that we have done, but both, again, just to try to illustrate the idea of rural resources and capacities. So ruralization it's very much stems from this idea of unequal development and how can we create more balanced development between rural and urban areas. So urbanization is a dominant global trend, and within Europe, population forecasts would suggest that this is going to continue, that the population of rural areas in the future is predicted to decline and urban to continue to increase. And also there's issues around inequality, that potentially urban areas have potential for greater wealth creation than rural. And again, this kind of broader issue of rural decline, that it has knock-on and related impacts. When you have depopulation, you have things like the brain drain that are often talked about. And rural decline as well is not the same in all types of rural areas. So perhaps rural areas that are closer to urban places have different issues to deal with than more peripheral rural areas. So to understand these differences a bit better. So ruralization is very much concerned with generating policy relevant evidence to support the harnessing of opportunities. For new rural generations, we're very much focused on the population problem and the depopulation problem, and the youth, particularly depopulation problem in rural areas. So again, we have a big ambition, and we have this big idea behind the project to get as well, that we want to create this broad shift away from this negative spiral of rural decline, if you want to frame it like that, to create this new positive spiral of rural opportunities. And within that, we want to ensure that this is sustainable change, and that there's a continuing cycle of renewal that is created by this new evidence base that we will create through the project. But we do have a specific focus as well, and there's two key areas that we're looking at in terms of how we look at rural regeneration, and one is this idea of future foresight. So we're looking at identifying trends in rural areas and in the wider world that can potentially offer opportunities for rural change. And this is the big picture, looking at the statistics, looking at existing evidence and what's telling us where these opportunities might lie. And then we're focusing much more specifically on youth and what they would like to see, and what we need to create in rural areas to create rural places that are attractive places for young people to live and work. And so that's the future forward-looking aspect of the project. But also we're looking at this idea of promising practices, be it policies, be it bottom-up community-based projects that can facilitate key groups of new generations in rural areas. Newcomers, be it entrepreneurs, be it migrants, not just young people. So this idea of attracting populations, new populations, to return or to settle in rural areas. And we're very much focused on agriculture as well. And these questions of new generations, the next generation of farmers, new entrants, successors, and dealing with this big issue, the big resource issue for farming, and particularly for new entrants and getting access to land. And one thing that's interesting about ruralization is as well, what we're trying to do is generate all of this preliminary evidence, but we're also going to interrogate it, try to take it to another level. and try to understand, okay, we've identified these opportunities. How can we realize them? What are the barriers? Or we have this kind of interesting project that's worked in one place. Can it work somewhere else? Can it be upscaled? So that's some of the kind of, I suppose, important evidence that we hope will come out of the project as well. So I've mentioned this idea of new rural opportunities. And some of the work that we're doing so far is kind of desk-based work to look at, okay, what are these opportunities that potentially exist in rural areas? So one of the issues kind of around the depopulation of rural is that potentially there are less jobs for women in rural areas. So we maybe need to diversify the rural economy into areas like tourism, perhaps, the wider creative industries. Also diversifying farms. So there are maybe more entrepreneurial farms, or maybe there's farm-based businesses attached to them to improve farm viability. Wider things like creating kind of conditions for remote working that we've all become very familiar with. But this is potentially another area, if we can't bring the jobs to rural, maybe the people can relocate and the jobs are located elsewhere. Rural innovation, so how can rural places become places that are associated with new business creation and entrepreneurship that maybe is more generally associated with urban economies, new emerging sectors like the circular or bioeconomy. And this wider question as well of how to create vibrant, attractive rural places for different groups of people. So I suppose key questions again are how to kind of realize these opportunities and how to sustain this kind of cycle of renewal. And within that, within some of the ideas we've been looking at, this idea of capacities and rural resources are key to our thinking and how we're going to analyse the specific case studies. So just for a couple of minutes, I wanted to just touch on some of the research we have been doing. And over the last 6 months, we've been collecting some data related to what young people, how they would like rural areas to be, what needs to exist in a rural area to make this an attractive place for young people to live and work. And this idea of, okay, we need to look forward, we need to look at what these young people want. And if we can create these conditions, we will potentially have addressed to some extent the youth depopulation problem in rural areas. And so some kind of, we've been looking at this work has been done in 10 European countries. And just for today, I took a very preliminary look at some of the Irish data and some of the things that these young people are saying that, okay, if I was to live in a rural area, these are the ideal things I would need. There's probably not too many surprises here, but I think some of the detail is interesting. So it's about jobs, it's about this kind of living income, but it's also about kind of stability. It's about the quality of the job. So it's about, and it's not just about this kind of financial stability, it's about services, it's about culture. So this idea of varied things to do, access to nature, so that rural places are kind of have the vibrancy that allow kind of allow for the livelihood that young people want. So it's also about community, and also these young people expressed a strong desire that there is a strong local community, but also that they can participate strongly in it. And some things more on the individual level around having family and friends close, simple things that I suppose are not surprising and that we all want in the place that we live and work. Another thing we asked, okay, this is your dream future, but what are the obstacles that you see to realizing it? So one of the key things that kind of jumped out there are the financial resource side of things, that this is kind of one of the first key barriers that young people potentially face, and also services emerged very strongly. So we have an idea now of the different kinds of resources that we need in rural areas to potentially build rural areas that are more attractive to young people. And hopefully from kind of that kind of initial sketch, we can see that it's not just one resource, it's a variety of resources that are needed to create the right conditions for young people to be more attracted to live and work in rural areas. It's things that are more individual to things that are at the community to maybe regional economy level. So the financial resources emerge strongly, but also the community and the nature of that community emerged as important. So there are a number of different kinds of resources that are important to creating rural places that are potentially more feasible for young people to live and work in. But also kind of within that, we have this idea of not just diverse resources, but we could maybe categorize them in two ways. As the kind of softer stuff, the social, the cultural stuff, to the harder, the funding, the services, the infrastructure. So all of this is important. And kind of to complicate it a little bit more, but it's not just about diversity of resources, it's about kind of how these resources flow into each other. So if we have, for example, the human capital of young people in rural areas, we also need particular types of jobs to match that human capital. So that these resources need to flow into each other, that there's a kind of complex picture that will create this kind of capacity building within rural areas. And just finally, I wanted to kind of take you through very quickly another example that looks at resource building from a different perspective. So we had kind of the futures thinking perspective and what do young people want and need, a range of resources emerging there. But if we look at
2 minutes left, Aisling.
Sure, yeah. A particular example of Scotland, and there has been in the last 15 or 20 years a significant land reform because of concentrated land ownership patterns. And within this, there has been quite a drive for community ownership of land with the broad goal to support sustainable development. And within this kind of resource picture, very much at the start, we have kind of legal resources or legal levers, legal change that has facilitated communities to buy and own land. But we also have institutions there as well that support the funding that's needed. For example, the Scottish Land Fund, the funding that's needed to buy such a huge asset as land. But this community buying process is not simple. It can take years. It needs perhaps feasibility studies. It needs funding, as I've mentioned. It needs communities to have formal kind of community groups. It's very complicated. And it needs a range of resources across a different time frame. So if we look very quickly at this study that looked at the particular kinds of skills and capacities needed for communities to realise this community land purchase at the start, pre-purchase, it's kind of the more softer stuff. It's the capacity to believe, the community to believe in themselves, to have the networks and capacities to get the process going. But as the process moves along, it becomes more technical, maybe more formal, governance around boards, around raising capital, and again towards the longevity and sustainability of these particular resources. You've got to continue to have community interest, continue to have community participation in boards that manage this kind of new community asset that they have been successful in acquiring. So to finish, I just wanted to touch on this isn't a perfect process either, and there are a lot of challenges, but that's been kind of monitored along the way, and it's a continually reforming process as well. But there are huge capacity building impacts in communities of this community land ownership process, be it new jobs that are linked to the asset, to the skills that are learned by communities through going through the process. So finally, what kind of couple of key points I was trying to make here in terms of capacity building and resources. It's not one thing. We need a kind of diverse stock of resources to build capacity in rural communities, and it's neither the hard nor the soft stuff, and it particularly is linked to context. So whatever the issue is, it could be that legal framework in the Scottish context that needs to kickstart something, but it could be something completely different in another place. And you also need these resources to flow into each other in a way that enables kind of catalytic effects. And potentially what some of these case studies that we've looked at so far are telling us, we do need kind of a particular, maybe a longer term approach. How long? That's a question for another day, and maybe is one that depends on context as well. So that's it for me. I've maybe gone over a bit, but do sign up for the Ruralization newsletter. We have a number of reports coming out early next year that'll give a bit more detail on some of the future foresight work, and also a number of reports around access to land. So thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Ashley. And it's great to see such a project up and running, identifying opportunities for rural regeneration, and also so that we will lead to hopefully more balanced development. And it's particularly interesting the variety of resources that are required in these areas to make something like this happen. We'll take questions maybe after Andy as well, but the next, I'll introduce you now to Andy Bleasdale, who works in our National Parks and Wildlife Service. Andy heads up a lot of the work in the National Parks and Wildlife Service on agroecology and agri-environment. We've seen over the last number of days an emerging theme where partnership is important for getting basically results to pressing challenges both locally and regionally. And I'm looking forward to what Andy has to say now on potential strategic nature project for Ireland. So over to you, Andy.
Thank you very much, James. This is the first year that I've actually attended the Winterage from beginning and hopefully to end through the weekend. My wife is a teacher and she normally pulls me away for the second half of this week to foreign climes. So that's the only upside I can find this year in relation to the global pandemic. So I'll be with you for the full event. So that's good. As James mentioned, I work for the National Parks and Wildlife Service. We are the statutory agency with the responsibility for biodiversity in Ireland, but depend on many other departments and obviously the wider community to do things for nature, not just ourselves. So what I'm talking to you about today is a strategic nature project for Ireland, and it's basically the first steps to advance better integration of and mainstreaming of efforts for biodiversity in the years ahead in the next cycle. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Ireland, I just give you a brief overview of our Natura 2000, our SSEs and our SPAs within Ireland. And to note that Ireland has a unique responsibility, particularly I suppose as the UK leaves the European Union, for peatlands, in particular blanket bogs and raised bogs, for marker systems along our north and west coasts, and obviously then for other landscape features that we have and hold dear in Ireland, like the Burren obviously, but also the Shannon Callows. And to protect these different habitats and species, we've identified a suite of Natura 2000 sites in Ireland, both SACs under the Habitats Directive and SPAs under the Birds Directive. And I guess as we're talking today about terrestrial management and farming in particular, it's important to note that 13% of the terrestrial landmass of Ireland is designated as Natura 2000, but that we depend to a great extent on the farming community to assist us in the management of biodiversity in the years ahead and both currently. We have obligations under the Birds and the Habitats Directives to report out to Europe in 6-year cycles in relation to the status of habitats and species under both of those directives. And if I just put out some stats on the Habitats Directive, it's important to see, or it's disheartening to see, I suppose, that only 15% of our habitats are in good or favourable condition, and that those that are in unfavourable condition, many of them are declining. So that is giving us a very important signal that we need to engage better in terms of biodiversity management into the future. The trends are somewhat better for species under the Habitats Directive and the declines are not as severe. But nonetheless, whatever about looking out from Ireland and reporting to Europe, Europe is not shy in telling us what we're doing wrong in Ireland, and I guess across other member states as well. We have a European Court of Justice finding against Ireland in relation to our failure to deliver the Habitats Directive to the extent that was envisaged, and in particular in our failure to deliver conservation measures on the ground in our Natura 2000 sites. So in the years ahead, we're going to have to do that much better and deliver measures that achieve a biodiversity result on the ground. Also important to note that the European Court of Auditors, in a series of case studies across member states and including Ireland, mentioned and noted that the CAP hadn't been delivering or stopping halts in decline in biodiversity, and highlighted the fact that there's poor integration, poor coordination, and lack of use of higher level schemes to deliver results. So that's the European perspective. So what are the solutions then? If we looking forward, looking at the years ahead, how do we better manage biodiversity in farmland, if that's our focus here today? We are currently engaging in finalising a prioritised action framework for Ireland, which identifies the measures that are necessary for delivery to address the priorities for the next 7 years in Ireland. And that would include the CAP, would go beyond that into the marine areas as well, and including water. So what are the measures that need funding in the years ahead? So that is a kind of a dry document that we're preparing at the moment, but should inform better integration, better mainstreaming, better targeting of measures in the years ahead. Through the CAP, as I've mentioned here, and we've been talking over the last few days in relation to the European Innovation Partnerships and their value. Well, how do we take the lessons from those partnerships and apply them through mainstreaming in the next CAP cycle? So that's a challenge for Ireland and also for other member states to bring the pilot schemes forward in mainstream delivery mechanisms. How do we take the lessons learned through LIFE and LIFE integrated projects and apply them in a more strategic way, in a more mainstream way in the years ahead? And where things aren't covered under LIFE or under the CAP, what national funding is needed, say for example through the MPWS farm plan scheme, to deliver in a small way added value to other integrations and other measures across the country? And how could we better use other funding instruments like the European Regional Development Fund, through Interreg, through Peace Plus, to target and bring added value to measure delivery? So there are a whole suite of different programs, a whole suite of different measures that Ireland could choose from in a toolbox approach to deliver better integration, better delivery on the ground in the years ahead. But the Strategic Nature Project is another opportunity that's offered by the European Commission that could help integrate a whole suite of measures in the years ahead. So just to note that the LIFE programme is coming close to conclusion for the years ahead, and that there's an enhanced budget for LIFE to the tune of additional 2 billion in the next 7 years. And of that, 2.15 billion is being targeted and ring-fenced for nature and biodiversity, of which 700 million, I've been told, has been ring-fenced for strategic nature projects. So what are strategic nature projects then? This is the Commission definition, so it's to enhance the achievement of the European Union nature objectives through integration, through mainstreaming, and through targeting and access to financing instruments, to build institutional support across government departments, to build capacity within government departments and in the wider community, to mobilise financing to deliver measures, and then to mainstream measures both now and into the future, using the SNAP as a primer tool to bring that integration together. So what will it do? Well, it's meant to apply not just within Natura 2000, but in biodiversity nationally, and not just obviously within Ireland, but across all of the member states. It's interesting to note that there's only one SNAP per member state, and that one can assume a notional allocation of that 700 million for each of the member states. And if we assume a small amount of that, we could achieve something like 10 million for the next number of years to use the SNAP as leverage to better integrate biodiversity measures in this country. And what type of measures could we deliver? Well, this is from a preordained European list, but means to deliver and achieve EU and national objectives for biodiversity in this case, to build institutional and external capacity, as was already mentioned by Aisling, to achieve better condition of habitats and species under those directives, to map and monitor habitats, to coordinate access to complementary actions, to deliver across programs, and then to prepare the ground, not just for the coming period, but for the period thereafter, post-2027. So Ireland, what is Ireland doing? We've applied for preparatory funding to access this funding regime. We've got a small grant, 100,000 if you need to know, for the years ahead to develop a concept note to apply for full funding under the SNAP instrument. So next year, we'll be preparing a concept note, which if that is successful, we'll be applying in the year after that to get full approval to deliver a SNAP post-2023. We have a whole suite of cross-governmental department partners, but other departments as well and other stakeholders could be envisaged in coordinating and delivering this path, or this SNAP, should I say, for Ireland. And what are the kinds of things we might think of doing? Now, these are just off the top of my head, very early stages, but how might we support the delivery of results-based payments in a better, in a more coordinated way in the years ahead? Things we've been talking about over the last few days in this group. How might we better integrate measures, not just for biodiversity, but for water and across agriculture, to fold in life projects, EIPs, mainstream CAP, etc. And by doing that, how do we build capacity within government departments, but also in terms of advisors, advisory support, development of scorecards, management of data, and also monitoring regimes around the country. And of course, more lateral thinking in terms of building green infrastructure, accessing private funding, not just from European funds, but also from industry. How do we manage forested landscapes, tackle invasive alien species, and look at other means of getting local actions for biodiversity outside of the farming sector. These are off the top of one's head. We'll obviously fine-tune some of those ideas in the concept note next year, hopefully. So in conclusion then, just to say what the problem is and what the solutions might be. So we need to look strategically and carefully at all of the opportunities to mainstream funding for biodiversity in the years ahead, not just within National Parks and Wildlife Service, across government, and in terms of accessing wider funds outside of government, drawing in funds from Europe. Looking at the CAP fund, looking at the LIFE fund, looking at the ERDF fund like Peace Plus, but also bringing added value in terms of national funding as well, and public and private funding. And the SNAP, to my mind, is a means through which we could integrate programs, all of the programs I've already mentioned and more besides. If, in the knowledge that funding is limited, how might we more wisely spend money in the years ahead? The SNAP can assist in doing that, in building capacity, in supporting multi-programming objectives, the CAP, biodiversity objectives, the biodiversity strategy, and so on, and can help us coordinate and assist with the centralized management of data, sharing of data across government organizations and with wider communities, and by doing so, building confidence in terms of delivery of results, which is all our ambition across departments, across directives, across programs, and across jurisdictions, ultimately, if the European vision is to be delivered. So that would be our vision of an Irish SNAP, and there'll be others from other member states as well. So just to show you in a brief outline some of the early thinking in relation to that, which should be delivered in 2023. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Andy. That followed on nicely from Aislinn's work, where they're identifying the need to create opportunities in rural areas. And I assume that this is potentially an important piece of the puzzle, I think, in terms of scaling up some of the initiatives we've seen in Ireland and creating opportunities at a much wider scale. What's your own thoughts in terms of where this fits into the overall sort of rural regeneration, building capacity to sort of meet some of the global challenges that we have in terms of biodiversity, climate, rural depopulation, etc. How far do you think this can go? I know it's concentrating on biodiversity, but would it be integrating a lot of other tools? It could be an important cog in the wheel.
Absolutely, James. I don't think it's limited to biodiversity at all. I think there's offshoots in relation to water management, climate action, and just in terms of best practice, in terms of building capacity for sectoral challenges across the board. So I think what we've been doing through all of our initiatives over years, multiple CAP cycles, for example, is been doing small things. What we now need to do is to scale that up and to factor that up and to mainstream some of these brilliant ideas that we've been having. As you know yourself, James, the results-based idea is very much associated with Ireland, but to an extent we haven't actually, other than the Burren programme, actually mainstreamed that to date. So it's about taking the next step, acknowledging what we've done in the past, but taking very strong strides into the future.
Very good. I see a question coming in here from Gwen, which is particularly interesting. I just think would be interesting to hear what you think shouldn't be delayed until 2022 and years after. Is there a danger that this SNAP being available later is an excuse for not doing things this time around? I presume this is a reference to the CAP and the ongoing negotiations.
That's a very good question, and it's a big challenge. You know, how do we actually engage now for the future in the knowledge that the CAP strategic plans are being prepared as we speak? So obviously with the delays in the rollout of the next CAP phase to 2023, it does give us some time to actually further develop and integrate that. And I was heartened very much by the Assistant Secretary from the Department of Agriculture saying a few days ago that he's hoping in the next 2 years in this transitional period to actually trial and test ideas in relation to results-based delivery that would inform the CAP strategic plan and rollout post-2023. So it's not too late, James or Gwen, I think, in relation to doing that, but we need to act now.
Very good. Just a question here, or a comment for Aisling from Verena Berard. This is, thank you, Aisling, for a very interesting talk. You're finding that young people want access to nature, in particular forest and greenways, seems to be an interesting indicator also for some pro-environmental viewpoints among young people. Is this pro-environmental, I suppose, viewpoint coming through in your research? I know it's early days so far, but in terms of what young people want in terms of living in rural areas and attracting them to these areas?
I think very much so. Like from the very preliminary glimpse we've done at the data so far, and it's just the Irish data, it's about kind of vibrancy and culture. And I think for some young people, being active seems to be hugely important. And the GAA actually came up a lot as a kind of key institution. But for some others, it's about being in nature, having access to beaches, having access to forests. So there's a huge diversity there. And I think particularly, like, these are young people who want or have an ambition to live in a rural area. So there could be a specific cohort that are there that potentially, you know, are kind of ripe for the move and really want to move. So I think, yeah. Yeah,
that's good to see that coming through. We're a bit tight on time, so I think what we'll do is we'll move on to the next part of our session. Now, in this next part, we'll want you to be more active on the chat and also respond to a number of polls. And I think both Aisling and Andy have set the scene very nicely for what we want to do next. Next, I'm going to introduce you to two of my colleagues, Serafeim Felekis from the University of Thessaly in Greece, and Mugurel Jitea from the University of Agricultural Science and Veterinary Medicine in Cluj-Napoca in Romania. They're both working with us on the RUR UP building capacities for sustainable development in peripheral rural areas. And during this session, we really want to get your ideas on where the gaps exist in terms of knowledge and skills and capacities in these areas to realize some of this rural regeneration and opportunities for rural areas. So I'll hand over first to Serafeim. If Tim, you can share the slides there. We'll hand over to Serafeim, and Serafeim will introduce first, and then Mugurel will give an introduction after Serafeim to what we want to do during the workshop part of this session. All right, over to you, Serafeim.
Thank you. Thank you very much, James. Good afternoon to everyone. My name is Serafeim Felekis, and I come from Greece, from the University of Thessaly. We are leader partners in the new Erasmus project that started only this month under the acronym RUR UP. Our intention, next slide, please. This is the consortium. Apart from our university, as a leader partners, we have, of course, the GMIT in Ireland, the CMIT from France, the University of Helsinki from Finland, the University of National and World Economy from Bulgaria, the University of Agricultural Science and Veterinary Medicine from Romania, that my colleague Mugurel will be presenting shortly after me, and the University of Osijek in Croatia. Next slide, please. Now, as James noted, we tend to detect whether the peripheral areas are needing a different approach. Firstly, peripheral areas, we know from our experience and common work in a previous project we did, an Horizon 2000 project, the HNV, that faced a lot of depopulation, biodiversity loss, and there is also a need for their heritage preservation. That lead us that we need a different, more innovative and multidisciplinary approach when it comes to empowering all the actors in those areas, from scientists, from consultants, from local authorities and decision makers to local producers and all the key players in that. Next slide, please. Now, as you saw from Andy, we know that in the peripheral areas in Europe cover 30% of the total agricultural areas. And we tend to speak about 15% of the agricultural holdings. In this map produced by GMIT, we see in Ireland that in the western part and where the Natura collides, as we saw in the previous presentation, we have the more potential of having high nature value criteria. The environmental values, it's also, as we have been told by our colleagues in Ireland, very important cultural areas, and they have low services from infrastructure and the population. Next slide, please. Peripheral areas are also very important for EU's farm to fork strategy, which has to do with the schematic you see on your right. We have a need for sustainable food production, sustainable food preservation and processing, but also we should care about our preventing food loss and food waste. Next slide, please. Now, according to UN's goals for sustainable development, although all 17 goals have to be served, we saw that 5 of them, that is the zero hunger, the second goal, the quality education, the decent work and economic growth, the life on land, and the climate action, are actually served and should be focal and central when we're discussing about those areas. Next slide, please. Our project aims, though, so it's the development of new knowledge concerning the sustainable development of peripheral rural areas. There is a need for the understanding which skills and competencies are needed by the labor market and the local society. There is special care for supporting curricular development of higher education about these skills and these competencies. And of course, the need for collaboration between different European higher education institutes in order to support professional competencies of the educators, but also for the students. All this, of course, will contribute to the international pool of open educational resources, pretty much how we have worked as a consortium and how we tend to work for the next 2 years for this project. Next slide, please. The deliverables, as we have been agreed and they started this month, have to do with the first intellectual output, which is the assessment of current educational needs and detection of gaps regarding the sustainable development of EU's peripheral areas. We will building e-learning courses, which now with the pandemic that we face have to be of more value. We will build a bank of case studies from our different countries, and we will give all this to a digital platform. We will test during an intensive study activity, hopefully in the summer of 2022 in Greece. And other than that, of course, the assessment and the report of our approach and the methodology that we adopted will be given. Now Mugur will present to you the first intellectual output that has to do with the skills and the competencies needed for higher education. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Serafeim. Next slide. I will say hello to all of you from the middle of Natura 2000 site in Romania, and this is due to the pandemic. So it's let's say a positive thing. So in the intellectual output number 1, we will look into the mainstream higher education in Europe in order to review the current syllabus and to see what we deliver in terms of skills for our graduates. And in the same time, we will analyze based on stakeholder interviews and stakeholder focus groups, what are the real needs of the professionals that are working in the peripheral rural areas. We have a legacy in that. We have a former thematic network in the area of high natural value farming. And there we saw that graduates usually do not come with enough and appropriate skills from our universities in order to tackle the great challenges that exist in the peripheral rural areas. In the next slide, I'm going to speak about what we see as skills. So a skill, it's something that allow a graduate to perform job functions that involve ideas. So we are looking to the cognitive skills, also to the technical skills, and very important with the interpersonal skills. We will review the syllabus, and we will try to propose alternative approaches in order to tackle the problems of intensification and abandonment that exist in the peripheral rural areas. And the former speakers already spoke about that. Next slide, please. The idea is that we will try to develop educational tools in order to sustain the education for sustainable development, which empowers graduates to take decisions in that special areas that are responsible actions for environmental integrity, economic viability, and just society for present and future generations. So these are the concepts that we are working with. And now I will hand over the floor to James that will introduce a first poll where we will ask you to answer. So James.
Thanks very much, Mugurel and Serafeim. So that was a brief introduction to the work we're hoping to achieve on this project over the next number of years. Now, today, what we want to do is gather information from you in terms of what you feel are the skills and gaps, in particular in trying to have the resources, skills and capacities among our graduates and young people coming out of universities and higher education institutes to serve the needs of these areas for sustainable development, for both improving this, as Mugurel said, environmental quality, economic viability, and just societies in these areas. So quite substantial goals, but it's whether we have the capacity to do that at the moment and how we can improve it. So just to get an idea where everyone was from, we had our first question up on the chat there. We wanted to get an indication of where everybody was from, and we see from that we have people from all over Europe, from the far north in Iceland down to Portugal and over east to Bulgaria and across the United Kingdom and Ireland as well, and Scandinavia in Finland. So it's great to see such a representation from across Europe. So I think this will lead to some fruitful discussions over the next approximately half an hour is what we've got for this task. Now, we also want to get an idea of what your experiences are in your main areas of expertise and whether you work in peripheral rural areas or not. So I'll just ask Tim to put up our first poll there. And if you can answer these three questions. What we'll do is we'll give you a minute to answer this, but once it hits 80%, Tim, we might actually publish the results. So if you keep us up to date, and when we get to 80%, we'll publish the results of the poll.
I also know the answers, the correct ones, James.
How are we looking in terms of numbers, Tim?
Up to 60% there now. Give it another minute.
Okay.
A couple of seconds. Okay, I'll close it there. It's slowing down.
All right, perfect. That's great.
70%.
That's not bad. We'll see where everybody is, what their areas of expertise are and what we have. Drum roll, and Tim, let us see the result.
I'm sharing the results there. Can everyone see that?
I cannot see it here now.
Yeah,
myself.
I can see it.
Yeah, I can see it there now. Yes, that's very good. Yeah. So we see that we have approximately 23% from the advisory service, 11% from education, 14% from farming and primary production, 2% from farming associations, 2% from the food and beverage industry, and 16% from bodies, and the rest from NGOs, research, and a few other. That's a very nice mix of participants we have today. It's great to see, just in terms of where people. So we see the majority are living in a rural area at 70%. We also have 30% from actual other areas, and we have in what people consider EU agriculture peripheral areas, we have about 45% in these areas and 55% outside. So this is an excellent balanced cohort we have today. So this gives some fruitful discussions. The next one, we're going to get into the work proper now. This is a more testing poll we're going to put up for you. We're going to ask you, if you just display the question there, Tim, and maybe myself and Mugurel and Serafeim will explain it, or if Irina wants to come in to clarify stuff as well.
This is question 2. Yeah.
This is question 2. Yeah. What is the most important skills? So we really want to get into maybe what are the most important skills you feel or your organization expect from graduates to contribute to sustainability of farming practices in agricultural peripheral areas. So particularly in terms of the people we have here from the farming community, if you've done some formal education yourself, do you feel that you're equipped in terms of your primary production to actually meet some of the sustainable development goals and contribute from everything from zero hunger right through to job creation and maintaining the environment? If you're in the advisory services, do you feel you've got the skills to address some of these challenges, and all the way through those involved in research, academia, education, and in the food and drinks industry as well? So which of these is the most important skill? So pick the most important. Now you can pick, it's hard to pick one, so you can pick a number of these as well. So we'll give you a minute or two to think about this. And again, Tim, as it comes to 80%, we'll publish the results and have some discussion around what the responses has been.
Sure, it's a bit slower this time, so it's slow and steady. I'll let them off for another minute.
Yes, and just to add from my side, I think if there are some skills you can think of which are not on the list, it might be worth putting on the chat.
Okay, we're moving towards 80% there now, so I'll end the poll.
Very good. Right, so we see the results here. So we see that basically 87% feel that in-depth understanding of interactions between land use and the environment and the economy is an important skill that people have to understand. This is obviously to contribute to overall sustainable development, but also a quite close second is the ability to communicate and work with a diverse range of stakeholders. Then to a lesser extent, knowledge of rules and regulations, markets, and best available technology. I suppose this really comes down to the core issue here is that we need to be able to understand how things work, how the environment functions, how we manage our land use, and how this all integrates with our economy to have sustainable development really in any areas. And I think following on from the theme of our the winter so far, we've seen this really emerging factor in Ireland and also elsewhere, that where we have successful initiatives, you've had multiple actors and multiple stakeholders working together. And obviously people feel that you need an ability to communicate across these diverse range of stakeholders. Do any of the rest of my colleagues, or does anyone want to put in anything on the chat really explaining their answer here? And if you put in something on the chat, maybe I can bring you in and you can explain to us why you consider one skill more important than others, so we can delve a bit more deeply into this.
James, I would like to add the idea that in the HMV linked thematic network, we had like a legacy, some innovation dimensions that were also mentioned here, like the technical skills, market regulations, and of course social innovations. That it seems that our group is considering the social area is very important. But what we are trying to do now is to identify which are the most important skills in terms of social cooperation with different kind of stakeholders. So I invite the participants to say in chat, or I don't know.
Does any of the rest of our project partners from other parts of Europe there want to come in at this stage maybe and explain what are the important maybe skills that they feel are required in their area to deliver sustainable development in their areas, or give us maybe an overview picture of what's happening in their area at the moment? I see there's one question coming through on the chat there, and maybe it might be some of our colleagues being able to answer some of this. It says, what has been done to get agricultural colleges in line with biodiversity education, and is land regeneration even on the curriculums at the moment? So maybe even from within Ireland or from across our colleagues in Europe, is there anyone there that would like to maybe respond to that in terms of giving an idea to the audience what's currently going on in our institutions or higher education institutions? Well, just to respond in an Irish context, I know as in terms of biodiversity education, I know within Mount Bellew Agricultural College, it's linked to us in Galway Mayo Institute of Technology. Within our Agriculture and Environmental Management programme, we have a range of environment and ecology and biodiversity education as part of that, and where we actually impart on our students a range of skills to try and manage the diverse range of farming systems and landscapes that we have within Ireland. And I know that recently the Green Cert in Ireland went through a process of updating it, and there has been more work brought in terms of biodiversity education into that. Now, maybe not enough in terms of the overall sustainable development and the interaction between the environment society and economy at that level, but there is a real start on that at the moment. And if any other of my colleagues want to come in on that, could you explain the situation maybe in Finland, Irina, in relation to this?
Well, I can guess when I started 20 years with the University of Helsinki in the Department of Agricultural Sciences, we had a very small and rather fuzzy group of agroecology. And in the recent years, we're really kind of provoking a lot of interest. And I think we are almost getting to be redundant because everybody now wants to be sustainable and speaks of biodiversity. Because 20 years ago, when I had my colleagues at the coffee room and talked about biodiversity, you know, they looked at me like, what? I mean, what does it do with food production? That's irrelevant. But now it's being part of the jargon, you know, it's there at least. And that's a very big step forward. And it's also become more and more part of the curriculum, which is gratifying.
Very good. I see Andy has come in there and he says we need graduates with specialist skills for sure, but we also need people with hybrid skill sets who can interpret ecological information but translate that into agronomic advice. And I presume this, Andy, maybe you want to comment on this, it comes down to this, maybe the response from people about this ability to communicate and work with a diverse range of stakeholders. And I'm wondering, are you finding in your work, do we have that skill set at the moment where people can communicate maybe outside their own individual discipline, or is this hindering possible initiatives at the moment?
Hi, James. Yeah, I suppose it is an issue that we often have people who have one or the other of the skill sets, but not both. So you need people who have a strong ecological background, but understand farming and agronomic systems and can translate the ecology into practical agronomic advice. So I suppose what we're hoping through these projects, and many of them which we've had in Ireland and the EIPs and the LIFE projects, that we're building that capacity over time. But what we're finding currently is that projects are stealing expertise from one another, and you know, which is good. It's a free and open market, but ultimately we need more people doing this work on the ground. And we would hope that the ag colleges can actually build that expertise so that we have more people to deliver good measures on the ground in the future.
Very good. Would you? Yeah, go on, Irina. Yeah.
I have a question also to all panelists and also attendees. How often do you have courses in which ecology students and agricultural science students are mixed up in to some degree? Like they really can interact and maybe work on the same project, like within the course. I have a course like this, which ended just Tuesday.
Yeah, well, actually, we have a course, and maybe some of them are listening in at the moment in GMIT. We have our applied freshwater and marine program, and we have our agriculture environment management program, and they have to study a module together called biodiversity and conservation in their 4th year, and also study together environmental legislation. And within that program, they debate with each other and do come at different topics from different angles. And one of the things they're doing is listening in on the Burren Winterage School over the last number of days. And I'd be very interested to see how what different disciplines have taken from this. So we are, I think, but this has really just come to the fore really in the last, in our own institutes in the last 3 or 4 years. And we're very much, I think, feeling the ground on this and seeing how it will progress. But I think we will see, I think you'll probably see the same thing, Irina, more of this in the coming years. I don't know what's the situation in Romania or Greece, Mugurel or Serafeim.
Well, in Greece, you can only do that in your postgraduate because combining different disciplines and having common projects or common courses. And I presume this is bad. This is bad because you either have agricultural students who have that 70s, one of the attendees wrote, have that 70s, think that land is everywhere the same and you have to put fertilizers and you don't need the proper programming. You have us geographers or land planners who always see environment as a different pillar and society the other pillar. That is something that I presume we hope to achieve in the RUR UP. We detected that agricultural courses or ecological courses or geography courses, as they have been written, actually do not refer to that peripheral rural areas. which is the core of the tradition in agriculture and stuff like that. Another point I want to point out is, of course, to congratulate Andy for his very good presentation regarding the Natura 2000, because I also have the honorable position of being the president in Greece's second largest national park, which is the National Park of Jumerka, Agrafa and Meteora in the Pindos, in the area that University of Thessaly will be working in the RUR UP project as its case studies, in building the case studies. We, by discussing with people, we tend to see that at the moment, the technical knowledge is somewhere there. There are always good scientists and there are better scientists that there were 20 years ago. The sole problem we find in every step is them defining the mechanisms of governance. I mean, the Natura zone is there, the peripheral rural area is there, but who is taking the decision? Who is actually responsible for that? Is it a decision maker that is at the national level or far away? The local authorities, the farmer itself, and sometimes the whole other society in the diaspora. I hope I contributed with some small ideas to that, James.
Very good, thank you, Serafeim. And Mugurel, do you want to explain or contribute from the Romanian side?
I will say a few things about our region, far east, I must say, comparing with where we are meeting now in Ireland, which is far west for us. Yeah, in our universities, there's a mainstream thinking about how to intensify agriculture, and even my colleagues are pushing for that, saying that intensification is a way of increasing yields and solving the problem, food problem, not only in Romania, in Europe, in the world. Then the farmers from the marginalized rural areas in Romania usually don't have access too much to information, neither to education. In our rural areas, I mean, in the peripheral rural areas, less than 20% of young people is having a high school degree, and I think below 10 and even 5 university degree. So there is a lack of information, and about curricula and the programs. They are very much, let's say, regulated by the state and by our education bodies. I mean, Ministry of Education. As a university, we have the freedom to introduce lectures on our own, and also we can change the lecture. So this is the freedom that a teacher has. But we have to work, and this is our idea, to work with our colleagues and to convince them that agroecology is the way of let's say developing our marginalized areas. I saw a comment in the chat, and I think it's very important. Some of our participants, I can't remember, I think Mark said that conflict management, it's a key skill that is lacking. I don't know, probably we should elaborate more around this idea about how Mark or others can see that this kind of skill can be introduced in a bachelor program curricula.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think another point that Gwen Jones has made there, and maybe Aisling has commented on this as well. Maybe Aisling might like to respond. She said on the chat, she thinks that Gwen thinks it's a lot to expect a student to come out prepared, but the projects, etc., are things where time is short and experience is needed, and no one wants a green newcomer. Where are the students to accumulate this experience? And I think this is an important point. From what we've seen so far, we need graduates that understand the interactions between the environment, the production systems, and the economy. We want them to communicate across a diverse range of stakeholders, and maybe touching on conflict resolution as well. them things are really only skills you can develop after you've built the basic knowledge in university. You learn a lot of these skills over time as well. And I think you were commenting on that, Aisling, as well. What do you think we're probably expecting a lot in terms of what we said so far, and what might be a way of combating this, or what's your thoughts when you saw that comment?
Yeah, no, I think a lot of people had made a similar point around kind of that this learning is maybe a lifelong process, and something that very much is learned, in practice as much as, and I know, like, I mean, that's going to be the focus of this type of education, but maybe there's another level to get to in terms of practice-based learning in different contexts, to try and develop skills that are, I think someone talked about deep skill development, that it's not something that we can learn in a classroom and and apply. So yeah, that was really all. And just kind of from my background, like, I'd be more linked to kind of rural development broadly, and it's the same story there, that it's the real world that the skills get tested and teased out, and that we really learn from.
I think that's the importance too of placements and learning on the job while you're even at university as well, and how to integrate that. Before I think we'll come back maybe to the conflict one if we have time at the end, but I think we need to move on to our next poll question here now, because we have about 10 minutes left in total. So if you could put up the next poll there, Tim. And thank you all for all the great response in the chat. This is something that will very much inform our thinking on this project as it's developed. So we're getting great information in there. Thank you very much. So it's the next poll.
Yeah, it should be running there. Can people see it? There's people interacting with it as we speak. So.
All right, yeah. So what we're getting onto here now is basically trying to tease a bit more into the Sustainable Development Goals themselves. We picked out some of them and we put them in sort of what we term plain. We tried to put them in plain English, the Sustainable Development Goals. So of these ones, which of the following Sustainable Development Goals do we lack the most capacity and knowledge to deliver? So do we lack the most capacity to deliver on environmentally friendly and economically viable agriculture in relation to zero hunger and sustainable production systems, such as SDG 2, access to education and education opportunities, climate action, job creation and economic development, or maintaining a quality environment? And again, it's hard to choose one. You can pick multiple choices here. And once it gets to the 80%, again, we'll try and shut off the poll, and this will add to more discussion, I hope.
Okay, so about 60% have contributed, but it's slowing down. So I might end the poll if that's okay.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. So we just see the results there. So we see again that basically it's this interaction that people feel the environmentally friendly and economically viable agriculture, I suppose, is what people feel that we have the lack of capacity to deliver at the moment. Access to education, that's not as high up there at the moment. Climate action, people feel we've lacked capacity in this, and also job creation, economic development. But again, I think the big one is this, where the environment and economically viable agriculture maybe interact. I'd like to get maybe some people's thoughts on that, either on the chat or contributions from the panel. We have had environmental science courses and zoology, botany, natural sciences programs, physical geography courses as well for many, many decades in universities. Of course, we've had agricultural science programs for decades and centuries as well. So we probably have the skills individually in people, but not within the married together. Would that be a correct interpretation of what people are saying on this front, or is there anyone there that would like to contribute on that?
Yeah, you're very right there, James. I think this is this is very difficult how to combine these things, because very frequently, most frequently, when we do or teach or research environmentally friendly or ecologically friendly or biodiversity, etc., we're not considering the economic impacts of it. So we're kind of leaving farmers to work it out for themselves, whether it's worth doing. And our students are not exposed to the economics when they're taught just agronomy or environmental farming.
Yeah, it just comes back to one of the courses we have at this agriculture and environment management program we have ourselves. We have an agriculture element, an environment element, and it's also run with our business school. So they get marketing and macroeconomics programs as well. But I think from some of the feedback we get from students, they find trying to jump between 3 disciplines very, very challenging, particularly when you get into the higher years of education, and the topics get more complicated in years 3 and 4. And it comes back to the theme that some people say it's a lot to ask of people, but I do think it's maybe in the way we have to maybe try and adapt how we deliver this, and realize the different perspectives of students coming to this program, and maybe touch a small bit on different aspects and major on other aspects, rather than, I think in our own program at the moment, we're trying to get a balance of all 3, which maybe is quite difficult. Any thoughts on that among the panel, or maybe similar programs among your own? Ashley, maybe coming from the rural studies side, do you touch much on the agronomy, economic and environment side in terms of when you're talking about wider rural studies?
Yeah, I think in terms of well, in the geography department, the physical, the human and the physical, the students tend to divide. So they go one way or another. So I think it maybe represents what you're saying here is kind of the problem, that the students struggle to combine these 2 aptitudes. And in terms of the kind of master's courses, again, there's been a course on sustainable rural development for a number of years that's recently been redeveloped, focused on kind of innovation and futures thinking. And you kind of look at the farm within that as it's within the economic context. So we're not really maybe touching on the day-to-day. So I guess there's only so much time within these the educational context as well. But yeah, I don't know if that really.
Yeah, I think maybe we need to be careful that we don't overload students as well. And I think it's this process of lifelong learning. I think we need to get more into this, and even learning ourselves. Like a lot of this is, I struggle trying to marry across economic, agriculture and environment. I read you're trying to come in there as well, yeah?
Yeah, but what I want to stress is that it's too much to expect one person to be an expert in all these areas. It's our expectations from farmers these days to know it all. And that's unrealistic and unreasonable and frustrating and makes mistakes, leads to mistakes. What we need again to teach is this interpersonal skills, like communication across borders, how to understand people who are on the other side of the discipline, and to understand their ideas and ability to merge this or breach these ideas into one whole. That's back to the communication.
Yeah, I think this is a very important point, and maybe we'll come to a close of finishing up here, because we want a 10-minute break before we come back at 3:30. But I do think this is coming to a very important point. We cannot expect one individual to have all the required skills in such a challenging situation we live in the moment across 17 sustainable development goals. And I think it's back to your point, Mark. We need people to be within our own disciplines better communicators, understanding other people's viewpoints, maybe working more on conflict resolution, and understanding that there are other ideas, other valid viewpoints out there that we need to bring together. And it comes back to what Andy was talking about in terms of the SNAPS program and integrating of a range of perspectives to actually try and come back to what Aislinn's concept at the start in terms of regenerating these rural areas so that we can use education as a tool, communications as a tool, conflict resolution as a tool to try and build these communities sustainably, regenerate this rural regeneration that Aisling has touched on, and using initiatives like large initiatives like that are coming now from the European Union, like funding through this LIFE SNAPS program and new initiatives. I think it's increasingly being recognized by policymakers that this is the direction we need to go, but it is a challenge for us all in education to actually even get our heads around how we're going to do this and how we're going to assist in the achievement of these goals. I think on that, what I'd like to do is just to finish up, and while you're at your coffee, before we come back to the next session, if it's okay with Serafeim and Mugurel, if there's nothing else to add, we'll add in one final question into the chat. And this is us to gain some information about what's going on across Europe with this audience we have. So do you know of any graduate programs that are building specific capacity among their graduates to address the challenges of sustainable development in peripheral rural areas that we've just talked about? And I'd like you, as much as possible, while you're having your coffee over the next 10 minutes, to maybe put in as much information in the chat there as possible. And maybe if you put in your contact details as well, if you want us to get back to you to get more details on this, it will be quite useful for us in our RUR UP project. I think this will be useful to you since you're leading on this, Mugurel, in terms of reviewing what's going on at the moment across Europe. Is that correct?
Yes, it's true. Thank you, James.
Right.
Yes,
thank you very much. Yeah.
I ask to all of you to write in chat programs, contact details, and we will come back to you later on.
All right, thanks very much. Now I hope this went well, and we can do it a good 10-minute break now for a coffee. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, good afternoon again, everybody. I hope you had a nice screen break, tea or coffee break. And welcome to the last session of the day, session 6 of the afternoon sessions. And this is my favorite part of the Winterage School every year, where we get to hear from some very special guests across not just Europe this year, but across the world. So the overall, I suppose, angle of today's presentations is looking at how farmers can act as first responders for some of our global climate and biodiversity crises. And I'm delighted today to see that we've 3 really interesting case studies from Asia, from South America, and from South Africa, which is fantastic. I'm looking forward to hearing them. Might I just remind you that if you're tweeting hashtag BWS20, please share on that hashtag. Also, we'd really encourage you to keep the chat going in the chat function. Really, really great chat in the first session there with James. If you've got questions, put them in the Q&A. We'll try to address them because our 3 presenters will be with us until we close at 5, and I'll be happy to answer via Q&A function. And also just to recognize that the session will be recorded and will be available for sharing. We'll probably have some podcasts from it as well. So you should be able to share with friends if you try to view it yourself again. So I'm going to begin, and we're going to go to a very late night in Japan, and I'm both I'm both sorry and grateful that Maiko and Nishi can join us from Japan. It's late in the evening there, Maiko, so apologies for keeping you up so late, but I think it's going to be worth it. So I'm going to pass over to you now and welcome you warmly. Maiko is from the United Nations University Institute for the Advanced Study of Sustainability in Japan. And Mike is going to tell us about experiences and lessons from the International Partnership for Satoyama Initiative, IPSI, a case study of forest grazing in Japan. So over to you, Michael.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, and also thank you very much for the invitation to this interesting event and giving me the opportunity to talk about our initiative and also the case study from Japan. In my talk, first I'd like to introduce our organization and initiative, and also I'll briefly talk about the international partnership and its activities. And then I will introduce a case study of forest grazing in Japan that has 2 different case study sites within Japan. And finally, I will briefly mention some lessons learned from the experiences. So first of all, our institute is one of the 14 institutes of the United Nations University, which is the think tank for the UN system. And our institute, UNIAS, is located in Tokyo, Japan, like UNA headquarters. So particularly our institute is focused on the policy-oriented research and capacity development on the theme of sustainability. So our project, International Serafeim Initiative, is feeding into one of the three themes, thematic area, which is natural capital and biodiversity. And our initiative is promoting our project is promoting the Serafeim Initiative, which was jointly initiated by UNU and also Ministry of the Environment, Japan. This is a global effort to realize societies in harmony with nature. And we have been promoting revitalization of and also sustainable management of socio-ecological production landscape and seascape. We call it SEPOS. In general, this means productive landscape and seascapes where long-term human-nature interactions, like through sustainable farming, are providing benefits for both biodiversity and also human well-being. So in order to implement the concept of Serafeim Initiative, international partnership for the Serafeim Initiative was launched during the CBD COP10 that was held in Nagoya, Aichi, Japan in 2010. So this is also a global platform to promote networking and also collaboration on the SEPOS management. So with the vision to revitalize society in harmony with nature, the partnership has been intended to contribute to the CBD's second objective in particular, which is sustainable use of biodiversity in both developed and developing countries. So having started with the 51 founding member organization, this partnership now consists of 267 member organizations, including national and local governments and NGOs, private sectors and academic institutions, and also indigenous peoples and local communities who are dedicated to work together to foster synergies in the implementation of various activities among the members. And our institute has been hosting the secretariat for this international partnership. So as a secretariat, we have been also facilitating some activities like organizing some global conference by convening member organization, and then also having some thematic workshop and organize some side events at the margin of the international processes like CBD. And also IPSI serves as an information platform to collect and also share the case studies, and also share knowledge and information through website, newsletter, and publications. And we have been also promoting some collaborative activities by, for example, developing some small grant projects and also encouraging some other kind of joint project among the members. We don't collect membership fees, but we ask each member to submit case studies on their own activities. So far, we have collected 197 case studies from around the world. The information on the case study are shared on our website, and also we feature some of the case study in the newsletters. And we have been publishing a series of case study compilation along with a synthesis on some specific topics like biodiversity mainstreaming and also area-based conservation measures. And in terms of the ecosystem types, agriculture and forestry ecosystems are dominant, but also we have some case study on grassland and marine and coastal ecosystems. So now I would like to talk about a case study on forest grazing in Japan, but before that, I'd like to lay out some context of Japan. So husbandry has developed, particularly since the end of post-World War II, in accordance with the change in the dietary habit of Japanese people. So over the past several decades, people in Japan has increasingly consumed meat and eggs, particularly pork and chicken. And Japan is really mountainous country with greater coverage of forests. So Japan has smaller coverage of pasture land. So the productivity of husbandry is relatively low, and working condition also very harsh with longer hour of working and also difficulty with hygiene control in the smaller area. And in addition to imported products, the husbandry in Japan has largely relied on the imported feedstuff. So accordingly, the self-sufficiency rate of husbandry in Japan is very low. So, but Japan has greater coverage of forest, accounting for about 70% of national land mass. So for example, compared to Ireland that has more than 70% of grass and cropland, Japan has a much smaller area of share of grassland, but the greater coverage of forest. Particularly at the early stage of post-war era, the government promoted the rapid afforestation to meet the growing demand for timber, particularly to reconstruct the nation. But over the past several decades, cheaper imported timber, like from the Southeast Asia, has increasingly available. At the same time, through the energy revolution, the use of fuel wood from secondary forest also declined. And accordingly, our demands for the domestic timber also decreased. So despite the great coverage forest, actually the self-sufficiency for timber product actually low. So in the end, so forest, great coverage of forest has become abundant. So in this context, forest grazing has emerged recent years in Japan. So on the one hand, the forest and forestry has been declining. At the same time, dairy husbandry has become more unsustainable through the dependency on imported feedstuff and also price depreciation of the dairy products, and also our increased intensification of farming. So in order to address these problems, forest grazing has been initiated to make both forestry and also husbandry more sustainable by using forests for multiple purposes and also creating new business by producing value-added products through sustainable farming. So in terms of the method, taking advantage of abundant land, like abundant forests, and also our rewilding land that used to be used for other purposes, the cattle had been sent to the forest to be fed on the undergrowth. So people don't need to mow grass for the forest maintenance. At the same time, they don't need to rely on imported feedstuff. And the density of the cattle population is also relatively low, like 0.5 to 2 heads per hectare. So this allows for the natural circulation of nutrients and also less needs for the hygiene control for the husbandry. And also through year-long grazing, so there is no need to prepare for a large cattle shed as facility. So this system fosters the healthier forest ecosystem and also healthier cattle, and providing greater ecosystem services for human well-being. And the case study of forest grazing also is one of the case studies submitted by the IPSI member. So that was submitted by the Ministry of Environment of Japan, but actually this project was designed and implemented by Amita Corporation, which is a private consulting company engaged in environmental strategies and also planning. So the headquarters of this company is based in Kyoto area in Japan. So they started first project of forest grazing in Kyoto region. And actually this project discontinued now, but the initiative was combined with the biogas generation and also organic farming. And building on this first project, the company also initiated another project in the northern part of Japan, the Nasu town in Tochigi. So this project is still going on in combination of tourism and environmental education. So in the Kyoto case, the company in cooperation with the city government, they started a biogas generation and then established the generation plant in 2005. And then in the following year, they started vegetable farming by using organic fertilizer gained through the biogas generation. And then also they started rice cultivation, again using the organic liquid fertilizer derived through the biogas generation. And finally, in the adjacent area, so they kind of started forest grazing that used to be somehow abandoned. So in addition to the basic system to connect human and forest and husbandry, so there was another material flow linking to biogas generation and also rice and vegetable farming. So this project has made some progress, by producing some branded milk products, like called Milk of the Forest. And also they launched some environmental education program in cooperation with the local elementary school. But while they were following land for forest management, actually the Great East Japan earthquake occurred in March 2011. One farmer who was originally from this Kyoto region, but running a cattle farm in Fukushima prefecture, so he evacuated from the devastated area and returned home, and then was looking for the site to restart their cattle farming. And through the consultation with the city government, so he approached the company, and then also the company decided to help the farmer by transferring the land and the facility so that he could restart their cattle farming. So unfortunately, the business for forest grazing was closed. And in addition, there was some runoff accident in the biogas generation plant. So due to the huge cost for repair, unfortunately, this biogas generation plant was also closed. However, some organic farming practices still continues to some extent with the involvement of the local farmers and also new actors migrating from the urban area of Japan. So building on the model from the first case, the company started another project in Nasutown, Tochigi. So this area is also one of the leading dairy regions in Japan, and also famous for tourism and also summer retreat. So instead of combining with the biogas generation, this project was designed to have more involvement of the local people and also the visitor, like tourists, and like offering some employment opportunities and also some field for environmental education and learning. So this project also made some progress, like sales of the milk products and milk constantly increased through gaining some steady clients like restaurant or shop, while providing some environmental education program and also recreation field in the farm. And actually some of the staff member of the corporation was planning to spin off and establish a new farm corporation to take over the business. But just before the launch of the new corporation, again, the Great East Japan earthquake occurred in March 2011. So in addition, actually this farm is located on the border between the Tochigi prefecture and Fukushima prefecture. So in addition to the physical damage on the facilities, the farm was affected by the governmental order to prohibit pasturing in that region. So the cattle needed to be evacuated from pasturing to another farm. So actually, so the farm was able to start a new business, but the sales needed to be reduced to 1/4, particularly due to the reputation damage with people in fear of the radioactive contamination of milk and milk products. But the local community offers some support to kind of voluntarily kind of help feeding and cleaning, also some running the cafe in the farm. So with that kind of help, the farm was able to restart pasturing in 2014. But again, a recent COVID-19 pandemic posed another serious challenge on this farm. So actually 70 to 80% of clients are restaurants. So these restaurants are encouraged to restrain or kind of reduce their operation. So consequently, the shipments of the milk and milk products was drastically reduced. So the continuously produced milk has lost its way to be sold. But under this circumstance, a new initiative started called Milk Rescue Team project that was initiated by a group of creators like artists, designers, and photographers based in Tokyo who visited to the farm once or several times and became a big fan of the farm or farm products. So by respecting the craftsmanship of the farm, so this group is now helping to develop new products and new brands and also new kinds of recipe, and also helping with the marketing communication to reach out a broader range of consumer and customers. So this case showed that even the good initiative for sustainable forest grazing have been facing a number of challenges over the past decade, like a technical problem of biogas generation and also disaster like an earthquake and the recent pandemic. And in the case of Kyoto, the initiative needed to be kind of closed or shut down, like even the biogas generation plant, even the help by the local government needed to be demolished. But some of the activities like organic farming have stayed there, are taken over by local farmers and also the new residents coming from the urban area. And the other case in Tochigi, Nasu, so it shows some resilience against the shocks or unexpected incidents, particularly through the help from the local stakeholder. But even now, the people from the metropolitan region are offering some support based on the shared value of the initiative, kind of respecting some craftsmanship and entrepreneurship, and also good quality of life, all contributing to the sustainability. So in the future, I think we will show that there will be further challenges with some uncertainties, but those, by taking advantage of some wisdom and also human inventiveness, and also like our collaboration with local and new actors. So there should be some potential to deal with or adapt to new changes in the coming years. So I hope that this case could be somehow relevant and give some insights to your initiative in Europe and Ireland. And thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Maiko. That's fascinating and beautifully presented, if I might say as well, very clear and very fascinating. The impact of forest grazing on the biodiversity of the forest, Maiko, have you done any research into that? How the environmental implications are monitored and so on?
So your question is about the...
Just about the environmental impact of forest grazing. Has it been of benefit to the forests?
Actually, this is only 2 cases, and I haven't actually seen the detailed studies to what extent this initiative have been making impact of biodiversity itself. I think in total, like including livelihood and some reputation branding, so that is somehow appreciated, but I'm not so much sure to what extent exactly the ecological impact in the field.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know we have one fan of the notion of forest milk. It's a new concept. It might work here in Ireland because we have a lot of talk about agroforestry, but more important, maybe silvopastoralism, where we can integrate trees and farming together. So it might be a future one for our dairy industry. But I'd like to thank you very much, Maiko. We'll have some time for questions later. It's particularly interesting, I think, what you have to say about collaboration between different actors. I found that a very interesting part of your presentation. So now we're going to move from very late night Japan to very early morning Colombia, and I'm going to welcome our next speaker. Our next speaker is Rafael and Telo. Rafael is initially from Spain, I believe, and has been doing some very exciting work, as you can see from the image, in Colombia. So he's going to talk to us about traditional cattle ranching, a conservation tool of South American savannas, and a study case from the Orinoco Plains region. So over to you, Raphael, and you're very welcome to the Burren Winterage School.
Thank you, Brendan, for your warm words, and thank you for your invitation, and thank you everyone to be attending this meeting and to give me this opportunity. As you said, we're going to talk about a very special way of cattle ranching, which is made in huge areas here in South America. We are going to be focused in the Orinoco Plains, which is the one I have more experience. The picture you can see here is in Bolivia, in the Beni Pampas. You can see the jacares living with the cattle and some birds in harmony. We're going to talk a lot about this in this presentation. So who I am? Well, I'm not a farmer, I'm not a veterinarian, I'm a biologist, and I traveled to Venezuela in 2002 to did my research about the Orinoco crocodile, which is one of the largest crocodiles in the world. And he did it in a private reserve called El Hato El Frio. And I had the opportunity to work with private conservation in these areas where the fauna is conserved through the management of the cattle. I get in touch with many private properties, and I get interested in this issue. So then I traveled to Colombia. Before of that, I was in Bolivia with some kind of silvopastoral in a private reserve, and now in Colombia for the last 9 years, working with these two things, private conservation and crocodile management, which are very close. So in South America, we have some special areas called tropical flooded savannas because they remain flooded in some months of the year. The ones where I'm talking is the Orinoco Plains, are shared by Colombia and Venezuela, is 400,000 square kilometers. The Beni Pampas in Bolivia, 120,000 square kilometers. The Pantanal, which is mainly in Brazil, but also in Bolivia and Paraguay, is 167,000 square kilometers. And the Wet Saco in Argentina and Paraguay is not tropical, not really tropical, but it's the same conditions. It's 374,100 square kilometers. In total, we have more than 1 million of square kilometers under these conditions, which is like Spain and France together. So we are talking about the llanos. The Orinoco Plains are locally called the llanos. Llanos is like plains, the translation. They are located on the left side of the Orinoco River, which is the third largest river in the world after the Amazon and the Congo River in Africa. And I'm here in Yopal, this small city, which when I'm talking right now, we are like 200,000 people living here. And as I said, it's a flat natural grassland that remained flooded for 4 to 6 to 7 months in the year, depending of the area. As you can see in this picture, this is from July. The forest is restricted to the sides of the river. It's called the gallery forest, but the rest are grassland, natural grassland. We have studies that demonstrate that the grassland was here before the first humans came to this area. And this is not a very nice time for the cattle because a lot of mosquitoes. It's not easy to eat, to get the food. It's a hard time for the cattle. Here, this picture is in October. This is the best time for the cattle. It's the transition between the rainy season and the dry season. The grass is green. It's not flooded. Not so much mosquitoes, so it's nice for them to be there. And this is the dry season, the summertime. You can see the grass is brown, and there are a lot of fires every year. Maybe you have heard about Pantanal this year, more than 1 million hectares burned. The fires is a natural issue in the savannas to remove the grass because of the ray light, sorry. But usually in these days, more than 90% of the fires are provoked by the farmers to have new grass for the cattle. It's not very sustainable, but this ecosystem is very resilient. So till today, it's still working. I don't know for how long anymore. So today there are 4 times as many ungulates in Africa than in tropical America. But in the past, we had a different situation, because in South America, there were a lot of ungulates where cows and horses are in this group. I'm a biologist, sorry. But around 9,000 years ago, the first humans came into South America, got in touch with this fauna. This fauna was not used to humans, and most of the groups were extinguished because of they were hunted until the extinction. Another theory says that maybe climate change has something to do, but I'm not really sure, because climate has been changing all the time, and this species never disappear until the humans get in South America. In Australia happens something similar, not in Africa and not in Europe, because the humans co-evolve with the ungulates and carnivores, with the fauna there. So when we are in the 17th century, we have that only 2 large herbivores remained in these large savannas. One is the capybara, which is the one here in the right. It's the largest rodent in the world. It can weigh more than 40 kilograms, the males, but it's restricted to aquatic areas. They have web between the fingers. They have sex in the water. So it's not using the grassland as much as they can. We have the white-tailed deer, which he used the dry areas of the grasslands, but not anymore. So around 300 years ago, Spanish conquerors take new large herbivores to the llanos, especially cows and horses, and not only donkeys and pigs and goats. And these animals find a very nice area with a lot of grass, with very few predators, and they replace the ecological function that were done by these fellows, the ones that were extinguished before. So it's a perfect match of to conserve this area through productivity activity. Sorry. So we have the traditional cattle ranching, which is done in large cattle ranches, which are locally known like atos. They are between 500 and 80,000 hectares. The properties here are big, as you see, but the soils are very poor in this area. We have a lot of acid in the soil, aluminium, iron. So that's well, for that reason, the densities of the cattle densities are very low. We need 2 or 3 hectares for one head, as you hear before in Japan was the opposite. There are very few fences because the cattle lives free in the savannas. It's only collected 1 time in the year, or sometimes 2, as you can see here in the bottom. They do the rodeos. They take the animals to the corrals. They put some vaccines. They separate the males from the females, the adults from the youngs. They take the animals to be sold in the market. And again, it's released again to the savanna. So in fact, this is ecological meat. The problem is we cannot sell it because we have some diseases problem, the aftosa fever, and it cannot be exported to Europe or United States when this meat has more value. So these guys, these cowboys, they only need a horse. They are very small horses, as you can see here, a rope, and the open savanna to manage this cattle. But very little stuff is needed. For example, one guy can administrate a 500 hectares ranch. Instead, when we have the rodeos once in a year, that they need more people. So little stuff also benefits the fewer impact on nature. You don't have people hunting, you don't have people fishing, you don't have people contaminating. So it's only good it's also good for the nature, for the conservation of the ecosystem. And maybe the most important thing is the cattle is feeding on natural pastures. We don't need to deforest here to have pasture for the cattle. which happens in the Amazon area, here in the north of Colombia, in the dry forest. They have deforested almost everything of the dry forest to breed cattle. It's a mess over there. So we have all the conditions to the coexistence with the wildlife, which is very abundant in this area. Remember, we're in a tropical area. We have high temperatures. We have a lot of rainfall, at least for one part of the year. So we have spectacled caimans and tortoises over here. We have anacondas killing caimans also. We have anteaters. This is a mother with his baby. We have pumas and jaguars. This one is killing an iguana, playing with it. We have thousands of birds, not many species for a tropical area. We have like 300 species, but a lot of abundance. We have herons, storks, seagrets, ibises, raptors, ducks, goose, many species. The ones of the right, I love them a lot. They are burrowing owls. They are diurnal. They dig holes in the highest areas of the savanna. They cannot get flooded, and they breed there, and they're very funny animals. Another advantage of this kind of livestock is a very low carbon. As you know, livestock is identified as one of the main responsible of global warming, but a study made 3 years ago in Casanare and Arauca, which is this area painted in red, we're talking about flooded savannas, accounted for 4.6% of all the country's cattle, but only emitted 1.48% of all the net CO2 emissions attributable to the national livestock. This mainly is because we don't need to deforest to produce the cattle, to breed the cattle, sorry. So we have all the conditions for the private conservation acts in this area. In Colombia officially are called natural reserves or civil society. They're privately protected areas with recognition of the Colombian state. It's a voluntary conservation mechanism. That means that the owner says, okay, I might want that my areas be protected. And if you want to remove it, they can do it again. A very interesting thing is that these privately protected areas have a signification that allow the owners to have conservation and production. For example, this one is a real case. I'm helping to declare this area is a 9,000 hectares reserve. The ones painted in brown is areas dedicated to the cattle. It's almost 5,000. The more than 50% is dedicated to the cattle. But as we have seen, this cattle, this is also a conservation area because the cattle lives with the fauna. And the green areas are the forest areas, like 3,000 hectares. And the red areas are the infrastructure areas where the houses are and the corrals are. That you can see is very small. There are 3 in this huge area. And in this reserve, it only lives permanently around 15 people. So it's very few people for a very large area, so we have a low impact. They have tax incentives, but they are tricky. In the national law, the property tax, you don't need to pay it if you own a private reserve, but this must be approved for the local council, and very few councils have done and approved that exemption. But if you do ecotourism activities, you need to pay one special tax for this activity because you are a natural reserve. So that's a kind of incentive for the owners. Another incentive, which is not in the law, is the protection against oil industry. The oil, we have a lot of oil in this area. The oil belongs to the nation, and legally if they found oil in your property, you cannot avoid it. But legally, you can do it going to the media and say, hey, I'm a natural reserve. I have 300 species of birds. I have caimans, crocodiles, jaguars, pumas, and these guys try to get into my reserve, and it works. Or sometimes it works, and they don't get into your reserve and leave you alone. So some owners have decided that this is a good strategy to protect their properties against oil industry because they pay very few money for that. So we have 119 private reserves in the Llanos area, most of them in the Casanare area. I'm proud to say that I have had to create some of them. The total area is 118 hectares in this reserve, with an average of 1,000 hectares for private reserve. As we said before, all these conditions allow the ecotourism in the area, which is another incentive for the tourists, for the owners, because they get extra incomes. In Colombia, it's very new, this activity, because this area, we are in around 10 years ago, we still have the guerrillas, paramilitaries. It was not safe even for Colombian people, much worse for foreign tourists. But since 2015, when the oil prices get down, many farmers start with these initiatives, and it's working very well till this COVID, this pandemic, which is, everything is closed, of course, right now. Another incentive for the conservation in this traditional country ranching, the sustainable use of the capybaras. These capybaras are very abundant, and in Venezuela, the price of the meat is madness. They pay much more than for the capybara meat than for the best meat of the best cow, and they do it in a, or they did it, because it's not working anymore with this Chavez, with this government. Everything is broken in the country, but they did it for many years, and it resulted very well. They use the capybaras in a sustainable way. You don't need to pay veterinarians, you don't need to feed the capybaras, you need to take care of the capybaras, and it's very easy to use them. You give some jobs to the local people, they give also extra incomes, and it works very, very well. Another fauna you can use are the spectacled caimans, as we said before, are very abundant. So the ministry gets into your land, and they say, okay, you can kill a number of animals, and it worked for many years. It killed more than 1 million spectacled caimans in Venezuela. In Colombia, it's not allowed, but in Venezuela it is. And they do. They found that there were more caimans after killing 1 million of them, because this is it's a cannibal species. So when you remove the big animals, you have another chances to the small ones to grow and to reproduce. Another impact on conservation is very special to me, is because of the Orinoco crocodile. This is one of the largest crocodiles in the world. They can reach more than 6 meters, like the African one, the Nile crocodile, or the Australian one. It's very unknown. It was very abundant in the past, but it was killed between 1929 and 1975 to sell the skin to Europe, United States, and Japan. And today there are more panda bears in China than Orinoco crocodiles in Colombia and Venezuela. So we have been working many years in Venezuela, now in Colombia, to reintroduce. We're breeding in captivity, and we reintroduce them into the wild. Most of them in this private reserves. This one of the rights is very special to me. It's called La Aurora. This is the family that managed the ranch. And they have crocodiles, they have jaguars, and they have cattle, and they live very harmonious with the nature. They have 17,000 hectares in this private reserve. But of course, the big cats, we have problems with them because they kill the cattle. The jaguar is able to kill any cow of any size. The puma is more restricted to small horses. So usually the situation in the area, even in private, in areas where they try to conserve, is to kill the big cats. So I'm working now with an organization. It's called Pantera. It's an international organization devoted to the conservation of cats in the world. And we have a program to prevent the conflict between cattle ranching and felines. It has many strategies. One of them, I think, is the most efficient, is to put fences to prevent the forest to prevent the cows getting to the forest, because the cats are in the forest, but also the water is in the forest, as we see at the beginning. So you have to put these water wheels in the middle of the savanna. They're moved by the wind. In the summertime, when you need the water, we have wind almost every day, so you can feel some pools close to the wheels, and the cattle gets the water. It's also the use of electric fields, electric fences. Let me share my screen again with optimize. This is in Brazil. Brazil, they have been very successful conserving the jaguars, and they also promote these strategies to prevent the conflict between cats and cattle. This is milk cow in Brazil. You can see how close the cows are from the houses, but as the jaguars are not killed there, they are not feared of people. So they put electric fence to protect these cows, and they have to. It also prevents the cows to escape from the area. And at night, when the jaguars, this is a big male looking for his prey. They are usually active at night, but not only. And when he feels the shock, he just jump away. There are more, but I think we don't have many time. So another, when you protect the big cats, you can have another advantage is the ecotourism based on jaguars. For example, a college from Brazil estimated that the jaguar ecotourism represent a gross annual income of more than $6 million in this Pantanal area in the north of Pantanal, while the hypothetical damage of jaguars and pumas on the cattle only cost $121,000 US dollars per year. So it's more profitable to have alive jaguars than dead jaguars. Of course, this is not the paradise. We have our threats also, especially the rice, one of the left here. The productivity is low and the benefits are low for the owners. So most of them decided to rent or to sell, mainly rent, some areas of these ranches to grow rice, which is terrible because they remove all the vegetation. They use a lot of agrochemical products. Most of them are forbidden in Europe and United States. And when the soil is exhausted, they change to another, they rent another area, and they're moving and moving and moving. It's like a cancer. The oil industry is also a problem. They don't need a lot of surface. We can see here an oil derrick. It's only like 1 hectare or maybe 2, but they need to build a lot of roads to get to the oil. And we saw before, the savanna is flooded, so they need to build the roads elevated from the level of the savanna, and this affects the hydrodynamic of the area, the fishes, the plants. It's a kind of problem. And also the African oil palm is not as problematic like in Borneo or in Malaysia, when they remove the jungle to grow the palm. They do it mainly in the savanna, but they also remove forests. But the problem is they use a lot of water in the dry season because they need to maintain the production. So when everything is dry, they are extracting water legally, they're extracting water from the rivers. That's, in my opinion, the main problem. So thank you so much for your time, for your attention. This is a pretty something typical of this area, so I'm here for your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Raphael. That was phenomenal. I really enjoy that. It's such a dramatically different interlude into the theme of the conference, while being obviously relevant as well. It must be so strange for you, Raphael, to come from Europe, from Spain, and to work where you do now. The challenges, conservation challenges, and the relationship with farming must be something completely different in many, many ways.
Yeah, it's amazing. When I was in Spain, I grew up with these documentaries of David Attenborough and these guys. I always wanted to travel to the tropics, while I'm doing for the last 18 years, and it's amazing. Yes, I invite you because this is a very large area, as we can have seen, but it's very unknown. Very few people know that we have here this good combination between production and conservation.
Fantastic. Well, we might come back to you with some questions. And again, I'd encourage anybody in the room to post some questions into the Q&A or chat, and we'll come back to them at the end of the meeting. So finally, we want to go to South Africa and to Ayanda Chele. We're delighted that you can join us, Ayanda. I think it's about your time. We're maybe 2 hours in a different time zone-wise, so it's not a bad time for you. Ayanda is going to talk to us about true conservation, build bridges of hope and understanding. Mambazo community as a case study. So we'll pass over to Ayanda, and you're very welcome to the Burren Winterage School.
Thank you very much for the introduction. If you may allow me to share my screen.
Please do. I
hope I haven't lost it. Okay, can you see it?
Perfect. Ayanda, just
thank you.
Yeah.
Good afternoon and good morning, everyone. It's actually in the afternoon in South Africa. My name is Ayanda Chele. I represent WWF South Africa in the Land Reform and Biodiversity Stewardship Program. The program has got a total of 19 sites, but I decided to give just one case study, which is under Mabaso community. We say true conservation builds bridges of hope and understanding, because we've realized that if we only focus on the conservation objectives and going to the landowners or to these peripheral rural communities, they've got their immediate needs. They have to take their children to school at the poverty lines and everything. So we've got to address we've got to have in our mind the philosophy of rural development through conservation. But as I said, I'm only going to focus in one particular community. This is a very interesting one because Inkosi, or a chairperson or a leader in our country, is one old man realized that when he was growing up, what happens in South Africa as a young boy, when you grow up, you go to bigger cities in seek of employment. But when you're getting old, you come back and live at home with your family. So when he was growing up and when he was living to Johannesburg, they could not cross this wetland that you can see in the photo here. But when he came back, he realized that no, man, there's something wrong here. This wetland is degraded, is being depleted, and anyone, even young boys, when they are herding livestock, they can just cross it with ease at any time of the year. So he got worried, and then he wrote a letter to a provincial conservation authority, which is Esemvelo KZN Wildlife, that guys come on and come here and assist us. There is this problem that I don't know. Then WWF became aware of the letter. We formed an MOU, WWF in South Africa, so that WWF South Africa and Esemvelo KZN Wildlife, I beg your pardon, can facilitate in this area. And then that's how the whole conversation started with this wetland from this community. This is just a map showing the location of the project. It's in northern KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa province. It's in the high altitude grassland. And again, this particular red demarcation demographic area was chosen because of its altitude, large intact grasslands with lots of birds that use this area for nesting or even for forage. When we did the biodiversity stewardship site assessments, we realized that, oh, fortunately, this site falls within an ecological corridor of species movement. And it also has got the National Freshwater Priority Areas wetland, of which one of them is that of the leader that was worried about that it was getting depleted. And lastly, the provincial agency in the expansion strategy, again, it's nested within their expansion strategy. So it's a no-brainer that we had to prioritize this community. This community owns a total of 1,400 hectares. It's not a big area, but the protected environment is only 455 hectares, the one that you can see on the maps here. One of the critical important, I I would say, measures or dynamics is that we make sure that we look at the institutional arrangement when we kind of like engage with these communities. As I said, we've got a total of 19. And in these cases, the number one, where you will have Inkosi or a chief, the advisor, as well as all the team, consisting out of 19 members. So without a strong community leader, without a strong community trust or community setup, your interventions, whether be agriculture or conservation, are likely to just go to waste. And the other setup in other communities where you've got a communal property association or just a randomly community trust, you'll have a chairperson, a deputy chairperson, those kind of things. Fortunately, with on the first one on the left with Inkosi, Inkosi does not, it's just, it's by birth. It's not a case of voting maybe after 3 years, it's by birth. So they tend to respect Inkosi going forward. And we've realized that now that this community is rich in conservation, we cannot achieve what we want to achieve on our own. As you can see here, the project was named in honor of Inkosi, which is Mabaso Community Protected Environment, but the community is Mkundeni community. On the table on the far end, that is Inkosi Mabaso, and then on his right is Induna or advisor, Mr. Msibi. Then you've got WWF South African representatives, Monty, Serafeim Felekis Nightlife. Those are government departments, Environmental Affairs, Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs. So we sit down, we establish something called Advisory Forum. From the beginning, we sit down on a monthly basis talking about conservation objectives, but we also talk about what's happening in the community. This community relies on natural resources. If you are aware of what we call island biogeography, they just isolated, there's no nature reserve or anything next to them, but they realize that their area is rich in conservation, they want to conserve it. Whatever we do in a community, we request a consent letter so that we take it to our principals. In 5 years or 10 years time, if the community has got a change of mind or anything, we can produce that, okay, we had an agreement to work in this community. So what's happening now is they've changed their mind. When we assess the community, it's qualified for a higher status, which is a nature reserve. But the community or Inkosi was like, okay, I wanted protection, but what you're coming with now, I'm not sure of, because we want you guys to sign a contract. And the moment you sign a contract, you are binding us. And we don't know what is the biodiversity stewardship program is. So Inkosi opted for a third category, which is a biodiversity agreement, and then later upgraded to a protected environment, which is what's happening now. In terms of capacity building that we've arranged for the community, they were trained in fire management. And the spin-off from there is that the district municipality, which is Amajuba in northern KwaZulu-Natal, is now utilizing the Mkundeni community members to do fire breaks, to combat block burns and runaway fires in the area, and they're doing their fire breaks all the time. You can see there is a light-skinned man in the middle. That's just a neighboring commercial farmer. On 1 year, they do on the right of the fence. On the following year, they do on the left. They do the fire breaks or block burns together, because if the fire runs away, it's not going to say, okay, I'm in your property now, I'm stopping. So they have to talk, they have to communicate. And again, they received training, certified training in alien invasive weeds. As you can see, wattle at the back. We've got a problem of wattle in South Africa. This community, as I said, it's isolated, it's far from the cities. Even though they remove this alien plant, but they make sure they're only removing it along the rivers and wetlands. They're leaving some wood stocks controlled, so that they can use it for firewood, they can use it for poles and stuff like that. And the participatory rural appraisal was done a while back to make sure that we capture the needs and of the community. In South Africa, again, the culture doesn't allow women to talk when, more especially young women, to talk when there's elderly men. So in a meeting, they might go there, they might have brilliant ideas, but they're not allowed to talk. But with this process, you make sure that they write down everything. You select them in groups of 4, 2 males, 2 females. They can select each other, they write down. We take all of that and put it on the wall. Whatever comes out of all the groups becomes an objectives for number 1. And then an economic feasibility study was done for this community, which came out suggesting that it would be better for the community to lease portions of their land to the neighboring commercial farmers. But the community was like, no, man, why do we have to lease our portion? Because our land, because we've got livestock, they've got livestock, we've got land, they've got land. We want to operate and work with exactly like them and have an income, not having to leave rural communities to bigger cities like Johannesburg, like Cape Town, like Durban, but they want to remain in Utrecht, have an income, have a sustainable life, and being able to look after their families. We said, okay, that's fine. Then we appointed a mentor who developed a grazing plan, that is in line with biodiversity agreement, biodiversity agreement, and the community started implementing that. While on that, I think it was 2013, then we accessed a small grant from GEF UNDP for the community to establish a sustainable cattle farming initiative. With the money that we got, it wasn't a lot. You can see there's guys at the back on their horses hitting livestock. Maybe you can see the top line is new of the fence. The bottom line is new, but in the middle is the old one. So a lot of things happened to make sure that this community, the first thing they did, they wanted to make sure that their boundaries are secured, and then the camps in the middle. But again, we were also advised that they must have bulls of good quality. As you can see, the bottom left corner, bottom right corner. The community, again, were advised that they must phase out these bulls after 4 to 5 years. And they said, okay, if we have to do that, we mustn't buy the bulls of the same age, because we'll have to phase them out at the same time. So these are the 2 big bulls. The other one was a little bit small. Again, we got them from the commercial farmers in the nearby. I think we spent about 75,000 rand. Now let's look at the wetlands. This is the wetland. This photo was taken in 2018, whereas the first photo that I showed was taken in 1999. 2018, this is the wetland. You can see how changed it is, and I promise you, you cannot cross in summer. And Inkosi, sometimes when he wants to go out, when he wants to refresh or anything, he just goes to this wetland for cultural purposes and a lot of other activities in rural areas in KZN. But the objective, the interest that Inkosi had is now has been resolved. So a lot of activities happened in the community. As I said, the infrastructure was done to make sure that livestock don't just wander around. And a few people again got employed to make sure that they control the livestock. So they've got now 3 guys that are heading the livestock and 1 lady that is responsible for the record keeping and everything. So the agreement that the community took was that because their livestock, they can range from 4,000 from the winners to 14,000, the big ones. They cannot charge per percentage, but they decided that for every cow that they sell, they must take 200 rand and put it into a community bank account. So that they are able to continue with servicing the farm. Sometimes they have to buy the fence, sometimes they have to buy feeds or leeks for the livestock in winter, those kind of things. And right now they have accessed a commercial market. They are selling all their livestock. They are selling their livestock into commercial market. And we also educated the community that, you know what, you don't have to sell your livestock when you are under pressure. Because what normally happens, they take their kids to school. They might have, for instance, this cipher, the red one, they want, let's say they want 8,000 rand for it. But when they are under pressure, it's January, they have to take kids to school. they might not find the person with 8,000 rand. The person might say, I've got 5,000 rand. Being under pressure, you end up selling your cow for 5,000 rand instead of 8,000 rand. Whereas if you plan your sales accordingly, mostly they sell around December for Christmas and January to take kids to school. You are selling with no pressure and at a price that you want to get. And in this slide, we're saying good governance is restoring the landscapes. The main reason why this community property is in the biodiversity stewardship, it's because of these birds that you can see on the left top photo. These are crown cranes. Critically, they are in the red species in South Africa, critically endangered. With the intervention, now the community that knows that these are the creams or something that makes their property special. They don't have to kill these birds. They don't have to chase them away. You can see the secretary bird, again, the insects and water, how clean that water is. After the interventions, there's nothing that is happening. And in the entire region, in the Amajuba district, rural areas in KZN, about 80% of people utilize water directly from the river for human consumption, for livestock, and for their crops. So it's critically important that people conserve this area as well as the water. And this river goes to Jozini River, that goes to Jozini Dam. And there's about over 2 million downstream users. So of this particular water in the area. So it's critically important again for people to practice sustainable activities because this water does not have to be treated for human consumption. It further, the Pongola system or Pongola River further goes down to Mozambique and it becomes an international asset. So it's critically important that we work with rural communities to make sure that they benefit while we are trying to conserve biodiversity. It has been realized, again, this community, that it's doing well in the country. These are the learning exchanges. People coming from all 9 provinces in South Africa to learn on what's happening at Mgundeni community. And the bottom left corner shows the livestock. When we got there, we only taught the community that they must feed or supplement their livestock in winter. But when we got there on the day, we're like, okay, now you guys are feeding your livestock in summer. What is happening? They said, no, you guys were slowing us down. If we're only feeding our livestock in winter, we don't produce enough numbers for the auctions. We want to compete at the auctions so that we are able to build our homes, we're able to take our kids, and we are able to fight poverty. You can see different people coming to the community. And again, the left top photo, you can see the involvement of women in the area. Unfortunately, as I said earlier, in South Africa, young people go to school, they leave rural communities, they go to big cities and trying to improve their lives. When they realize that the job opportunities are not that good, then they come back to rural communities or rural places and try to start a life there. Again, we've learned that with a more coordinated community, it's easy to attract the investment. Here, we received funding from Heineken to make sure that this community, it's Mgundeni community, have got the equipment that's required to combat and fire and manage the fires, the runaway fires. As I said, it's in a grassland. This one, this project started in 2019. As I said, they're removing alien plants. Again, removing alien plants means more grass, means more livestock. This is, again, community. Fortunately for them, they identified the opportunity from the Department of Agriculture and Rural Development. We only came to assist them doing the proposal. They secured it, and now they are happy. People are employed, staying at home. They don't have to leave their families. They're doing well. And in 2021, again, we're having a national conference that is happening in this community. I don't know how that is going to pan out, but people at a national level, they want to visit this community to see how it's going to happen. Unfortunately, at the moment, we don't have all the resources, but we're hoping it will happen. It hasn't been a smooth road. We've had some lessons and some challenges, But what we've learned is that everything that you are doing in a community, you must do it with you must include them, and you must do it at a slow pace. The people in this area, they speak a vernacular language called isiZulu. They do not understand and know English. You've got to translate everything into their language. And in most cases, conservation might appear that it's of less importance, but that's not the case because people don't have basic services, tapped water, sanitary toilets, those kind of things. But the moment you try to address that, poverty, you cannot tell someone to protect a bird while his or her family doesn't have food on the table. So that's why I said you've got to make sure that you address the community development through conservation objectives, bringing this investment into community, making sure that people are employed at a local level, therefore make sure that they are also conserving the biological diversity in their area, looking after the water. Joint priorities, financial resources, everything that you need to do in rural communities need money. If you want to construct camps, you need money. We keep on asking. And there's mining in the area, there's politics. One of the most challenges is that a 1,400 hectares plot is owned by over 500 people. Imagine trying to convince all of those people into one idea. Some of them will just leave the meeting, some of them will listen, some of them will take it, but slowly with patience, people end up seeing what you are trying to do and support the initiative. This is what we want to do, to see at the end of the day, the ecosystems functioning and providing services to people. At WWF, we're saying we want to see people living in harmony with nature. So these slides demonstrate exactly people at the center of everything. The left top picture shows the forest and waterfalls, clean water. You see the livestock, the rats, the water, the wildlife, and the middle right photo, that is my hand. I'm holding a medicinal plant. I got to a meeting, I was coughing, and they just went out to the wetland. They got this thing, they gave me the roots. I promise you it was very bitter. But in 10 minutes, I was fine. I learned something when I got there. But we want people living in these landscapes, making sure that they're taking care of this land and they don't see the need of leaving their families, leaving their homes, going to big cities, while they've got a enrichment of their land and producing. All they need is just somebody to try to assist them and see the potential. And again, we haven't been doing this alone. As I mentioned, SM Felekis and Wildlife, the South African National Biodiversity Institute, the departments, the communities in STARS, because we work with everyone to make sure that we achieve an objective of rural development and making sure that conservation objectives are in line with what's happening. And we are not only interested in conservation activities, but make sure that sometimes we find ourselves motivating kids, learners, trying to encourage them what careers to take to school. If they invite you, you've got to go there. So you become a jack of all trades. I thank you. I guess
very
everyone
much.
was still there.
Thank you, Ayan. That was fantastic. Well done, and thank you for keeping pretty much the time. Some great responses to your presentation. I think James puts it nicely when he says that Ayan sums today's sessions up for me in terms of the interaction between agriculture and nature. It's all about building bridges of hope and understanding, and I think we're having similar conversations and thoughts here in Ireland and Europe as well, Ayan, that you can't really divorce nature conservation from broader rural development concerns. And I think that point is very well made. And in fact, we had a question earlier from Frank Nugent, which I think is equally relevant now, that one of the main planks in sustainable development is to have and listen to all voices of stakeholders and understand their specific perspective. I just wanted to ask a question of all three speakers. I mean, it's a joy to listen to the three of you and to appreciate the diversity of the situations that you all operate within, the remarkable wildlife, but also the culture and the communities that you show as well. But can I ask the three of you in order of speakers, what do farmers in your country perceive of the current discussion about the environment and environmental change and the role of farming? Do farmers feel threatened? Do they feel as if they're being victimized at all? Do they feel challenged by the whole environmental change that's happening? And secondly, would you have any comments on how farmers feel about the conservationists, the people who try to encourage them? I mean, some of you work in conservation organizations. Do farmers feel that you're there to support them, or you're there to change their minds, or what's the relationship like? So maybe to start with, Michael, I hope you can understand those questions and maybe try to respond.
Okay, so not necessarily particularly on this case, on the forest grazing. I've been in touch with kind of many farmers, particularly for kind of rice cultivation. Actually, in Japan, and historically, the agrarian community is somehow political, so we call it kind of a triangle, like the power relationship between the political party and also like the bureaucratics and also the farmers association. So that kind of a political triangle was really strong somehow to exercise political power to kind of make policy and also our implementation in Japan. And then, but I think our agrarian society has been changing over decades in the post-war era. So I think now the agrarian society has somehow been losing a political power in a way. But at the same time, of course, environmentalism are going on in Japan, but still, I think it's, of course, in general, it's minority. And then having been in touch with some organic farmer, they feel somehow lonely in a way to kind of take some initiative. But I think in a collective manner, they are trying to keep in touch and also exchange communication and information. So I think slowly such kind of a collective action getting kind of gaining some power, but still I think it's a kind of minority in Japan in general. So, but I think it's become more diversified, kind of not only in the agrarian society per se. So they are trying to kind of communicate with different kinds of stakeholders, like in the case I introduced. So they are also trying to work with some different sectors, like particularly in the second case of the forest grazing, they are now in touch. The case itself also kind of in collaboration with some kind of a communication company that hosts some facility for the people with disabilities. So I think they are taking advantage of some other communication route or channel so that they can survive and also kind of expand their environmental friendly practices in a different way or unique way. So yeah.
Thank you, Michael. Very interesting. And over to you, Raphael. This, in some of the pictures are really stunning that you have to present. Do farmers, because they're mainly cattle farmers, I guess, do they see this environmental shift as being a threat to their livelihoods or possibly an opportunity?
It's clearly an opportunity. Here, the farmers, they don't feel part of the problem. They feel they are part of the solution. The problems they have is they don't have a recognition for their job, and not only for the money, for the resources, but only to promote this activity as a sustainable activity for the last 300 years, in this area. So always the farmers are the guilties, the forest, they have many actions against the environment, but here is the opposite. They help to conserve, they preserve, and they need to be supported. The things have changed for the last, let me see, around 8 years. Some international cooperation is coming here We have some projects from USAID, the organization, the corporation from the United States, from WWF, from the JEF programs. But this is a huge area, and not all the farmers get benefits from these projects. So this is the main problem we have here. We need to promote more what we're doing here, because we are convinced, and they are convinced, that they are doing the good in a good way. And so these spaces, like the ones you invite me, thank you so much, are very important to promote the initiatives, not only in Colombia and Venezuela, but also in Bolivia and in Brazil.
And Raphael, if I might add, what is your attitude to you and your organization? Do they feel that you're part of an opportunity for them to unlock these potential opportunities, or do they feel that they're just having to do what you tell them in order to
Yes, that's what we try to do every day, no? To get resources to these people, not to change their production from the cows to the rice or to the oil palm. That's what we're trying to do every day. We are an NGO, you know, NGOs who lives from asking for money, knocking doors all the day, and some doors get open and but not the others. That's our work. And it's fascinating, because it's easy to do in the fact, because they only have to do what they have been doing for many years ago, their parents, their grandparents. It's not when you have to ask for changes, you always find resistance. But they don't need to change. That do small changes in the way of managing the cattle, to continue producing, to continue preserving the nature. So it's a great opportunity right here. So when I came here 20 years ago, I get fascinated, and I say, no, I have to stay here. I don't want to go back to Europe.
and do you feel like you're winning, Raphael?
Winning? No, we are not winning. We are not winning. We win battles, but we are losing the war.
Okay. To come to you, Ayande, thanks, Raphael.
Thanks to you.
The same question to you, Ayande, if you wouldn't mind. Do farmers, again, livestock farmers in South Africa where you work, do they see the environmental change and the pressure on them to farm in a certain way as being threatening, or do they see the opportunities? And also, do they see then your organization as being there to support them, or basically being there to tell them what to do?
Thanks very much for the fantastic question. I would categorize the farmers into two. Mainly, I would say the commercial farmers with the resources, and the rural communities without the resources. The commercial farmers in most cases will have lawyers, will have a better understanding, so they can easily tell if they like it or not. But in most cases, they prefer to have conservation for a number of reasons, because they feel like if they've got a conservation status on their properties, maybe that can help them fight other, I would say, battles like mining, those kind of things. So some of them see it as a benefit. But when you go to rural communities, again, it's a dilemma, because you want to conserve the land, but when mining comes, people think they're going to get job opportunities, and that's something that they want to see happening now. So whereas when you're talking about conservation, they're only going to see change in 5 years, realize benefits in 15 to 20 years. So it takes time. It really requires a strong, what I call leadership from the communities. But again, in South Africa, conservation as a whole is still viewed as something that is for white people or people of the middle class. But when we introduce the stewardship into rural communities, then they start by taking us to different directions. Like they will tell you, our kids smoke dacha. So in a nutshell, you'll be like, I mean, it's your responsibility as a parent, you know. But we say, okay, if your kids smoke dacha, let's try to find out where do they get it, you know. Let's involve the local police. Let's try to establish or make sure that that problem is sorted. By doing so, they're testing your patience. They want to see how long you're going to stay. When it comes to NGOs, they see the big NGOs like somebody that comes to work and help them. But there are those small NGOs, maybe I would say a fly by night. When they come, it depends again on a community leader or community, what they want to do. But in most cases, when you come and introduce conservation objectives, the community will tell you about their immediate needs. Sometimes you find out there's somebody who doesn't have an identity document. You've got to take that person, drive them an hour to a big city, stand with them in a queue, spend the whole day, buy them food, come back, and then that person is going to tell the whole community, no, these guys are genuine. They are actually here to help us. You know, those small things, they start realizing, but you've got to have patience, you've got to stay to make sure that you work with them. Try to address other objectives, other immediate needs that the community might have. And then the conservation objective will just take care of itself. But now and then you must come back and say, okay, the real reason why I'm here, it's because I want that particular wetland protected. I want this. For example, another community recently, we wanted to protect a particular wetland, but that's where they're harvesting water. So we had to buy them JoJo tanks, the green tanks, to harvest water. Because if they've got the harvesting water from the rain, that means there's less time of rural people going into the wetland to fetch water. And by doing so, we're hoping the species richness will improve. The frogs that we want to protect, again, they're going to thrive. So it's a mixed mash, but you've got to step out of your comfort zone, and there's no one shoe fits all.
Thank you, Ayanda. I have to say, I'm really delighted with the diversity and the quality of the presentation today. I love what you do and the passion with which you all do it. I love the fact that you use very practical approaches to engage with the communities, like you showed the example of fencing and watering facilities. I also like the fact that we've seen all of you, three of you, to approach the communities that you work with respect, which I think is really important, and I think that's fundamental to the success of these initiatives. We've many differences between us, but I also think we've got a lot in common across the projects we heard from today, and also the projects that we work with in Europe. We all have challenges, and we all have moments of hope as well. So I think I'm going to close that session now, and I'm going to thank you all so much and wish you the very, very best with your really important work. So best of luck with that. To the rest of the delegates, I'd like to thank you for your participation this afternoon. I think it's been a very lively discussion, lots of chat and lots of Q&A. The Burren Winterage School continues this evening with a really great person, a guy called Patrick Holden from the UK, who runs a sustainable food trust. And he is a farmer who speaks a lot about respect for food and being rewarded properly for the food that's been produced, and also looking after the environment. And he's a real leader in that regard. So I hope you can tune into that conversation at 8 p.m. tonight in about 3 hours' time. Tomorrow evening, this is one for you, Ayanda and Maiko and Raphael. We have this wonderful competition in Ireland every year where we identify farmers who do great things for conservation and nature on their land. And we have a celebration to acknowledge those people and to say that the farmer is the one who will make the change at the end. So tomorrow evening at 8 p.m, we have the Farming for Nature National Awards, which we hope you can tune into, and we'd like to see those awards take place in other countries across the world in the future as well. So I'm going to close the meeting now and to thank everybody and to wish you well. All of the presentations from today and from the past 2 days will be available in the coming days on our website, burrenwinterage.com, and we'll be issuing podcasts and tweets and so on as well to try and spread the message of the important work that you're all doing. So thank you very much, and we hope to see you again sometime. Take care.